So tonight's event is all about ensuring that we put our best foot forward to purchase property in 2026, whether it be residential or investment property. And Andrew, I wanted to start with you. Financial planning is often at the forefront of a lot of our financial goals, obviously. But from a financial planning perspective, how can we better flesh out and articulate our financial goals when it comes to purchasing property, whether it be owner occupied or investment property?
Thanks, Gianni. That's a very good question. In financial planning, and any planning in general, you got to begin with the end in mind. So, you know, what's your why for buying a property? Lots of people get out, and often it's a big Australian dream to just say, "Oh, I want to own that house with a white picket fence." It's not enough these days. You want to think about: is it an emotional purchase? Is it for lifestyle? Is it to live in? Is it for investment property purposes? If it's to live in, it's you think about what you can afford, what can you afford comfortably without foregoing your lifestyle, depending on who you are. And a lot of the times these days, the cost of living has gone up. The way we enjoy ourselves has gone up. People like to travel more. People like to have subscriptions. People like to go out to eat at night and more often than what they did in the past years. They like a bottle of wine or two or three. I don't, no one in particular. And so, we are living longer. So you don't want to wake up at the end of the decades and say, we haven't really lived life. We've thrown everything into our mortgage. So that's one side. That's your living in your property and it's a lifestyle asset. Then there's buying as investment property. And so it's to say, what sort of capital growth are we going to get out of this? What's the yield that we're looking to seek, and stress test that. And so you're sitting with as an advisor, I'm projecting forward and saying, can you afford it? What's your income like? Are you going to have children? How many children? How's that going to affect this strategy? Is it going to knock you off? Because there's no point buying a long-term asset that should be of good quality, and you want to hold for a number of years, only to be forced to sell it during difficult times. And then stress testing that with spikes in interest rates, loss of job, and all these sorts of things we would throw at it to make sure that you're secure and comfortable, right? And so, I was talking the other day about, thinking about in George Lamb, Mr. Accountant, but like proposed tax changes around a negative gearing, capital gains reduction in the offset. So, these are all considerations that, geez, Gianni better find an even better property, to make sense, even if expecting none of these windfalls, right? And then lastly, we all have a goal of where we want to be and where we are in life. And so that clarity is property should augment that. You shouldn't feel that because you bought a property that you failed to be the business owner that you wanted to be. You failed to provide the education for your children that you wanted to. You should be able to do all those things and buy property. And if you can do all of those things, you're doing well.
Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it. Look, I align with a lot of that. Like financial planning, land, investment property really needs to get you from point A to point B, and financial planning is a perfect space. But I think once we understand our goals and how we've articulated them, the next point is understanding where we're going to get the money. And very rarely nowadays do people have that sort of cash up front. So I think over to Mike. From lending policies and interest rates, they've changed a lot over the years, especially the way we borrow money, the policies associated with borrowing money, our capacity to borrow money. What should buyers be doing now in preparation to be able to strengthen their borrowing capacity and put them in their best position to avoid any financial surprises in 2026?
Well, the answer is so many things. First, obviously, save. You're going to need a deposit, whether it's the 5% under one of these government schemes or if it's 20% for a normal non-insured loan. So save, and then understand your borrowing capacity. There's no point in people coming to you and telling you, I want $1 million property when they can only afford a $700,000 one. Think about your purpose. Are you a rent investor? Are you looking to buy an investment property supported by rental income, or are you looking to buy something that you want to live in? And then start thinking about things like you need stability in your employment. Most lenders want to see you in a steady, stable role for at least 6 months before they're going to take your income. There are some exceptions around that, but generally they like to see stability. look at what your expenses are, because that's going to be a big determinant of your borrowing capacity. So is it time to get rid of all those high limit credit cards that you're not using? Really understand what your position is and plan for surprises, because interest rates can go up and do. And if that's the case and you're at a variable rate loan, then your loan's going to be costing you more than you might have planned for. So be ready for some surprises. And I think, in general, those are the kinds of things that you want to do. Just sort of really understand your position going in. Don't go out and find the property, fall in love, and then come and tell your broker, hey, I bought this thing on the weekend. Can you get me a loan? It's about planning. It's about understanding your real goals and objectives. It's about knowing your capacity and being absolutely ready. And then when you get to that point, why not get pre-approved? I mean, a normal pre-approval will last for 90 days and can generally be rolled over relatively easily for a further 90. So you've got 6 months going out there with the confidence that you're pre-approved, subject to that property being acceptable to the lender. And if that's the case, you're going to be in a far stronger position than borrowers who are finding the place and then trying to find the money. So why not get pre-approved and really understand that you can go and bid with confidence or make an offer with confidence, knowing that the money's there if you're ready to act. So those are some of the sort of logical, sensible things that you can do to position yourself well to be ready to move as and when you find the right property.
Very good. Yeah, I definitely think that you need to work closely with your mortgage broker before, during, and even after you get a loan to put yourself in the best position. I often tell people, like, interest rates will come and go, but the price that you buy the property at will never change. And more often than not, people need to understand, well, what my capacity is, and then work with their mortgage broker to ensure that, yes, it's within their capacity, and the lender that they've pre-approved with, they haven't blacklisted that area for whatever reason. So definitely working with your mortgage broker is more essential. But aside from people that have that pre-approval, I feel that the most common and sometimes the last line of defense is your property lawyer and conveyancer. So I wanted to hand over to Daniella. Like, legal issues can often catch buyers off guard. And I know many transactions you've come to Monday morning email and found that your client's been successful over the weekend at auction, and here's the contract. But many transactions aren't straightforward. So how can people better protect themselves from any legal surprises and conduct proper due diligence before they start making offers in 2026?
First of all, they need to get themselves a good lawyer, conveyancer, before before signing anything. Like, we're finding more and more that the market and real estate agents are pushing people to buy. They put buyers in that position that you're gonna miss out. This is your chance. If you don't sign out, that's it. You lost it. And emotions kicking. And more often, I actually have to talk to my clients and say, you've got to take a deep breath in. Like, honestly, you've got to do your due diligence. And that's the biggest problem. People jump into that house because they think it's almost like FOMO. Like, if I don't buy it, then somebody else will buy it and I'll miss out and I won't find anything else. I have to do it. So there's a lot of push from, real estate agents, third parties to say, you've got to do that. And people are buying out, of emotion rather than think about it. So we like to instruct our clients. I like to have early conversations. So it goes back to what Mike was saying. You really need to do your due diligence in advance. You've got to be ready. You've got to have your pre-approval. You've got to have, your reports sorted before you make that offer. You've got to have your contract review. All of that before you have the strength and you are in a position to say, okay, now I can move forward and I can make an offer. And if that doesn't happen, it's okay. There will be another house around the corner. Don't be pushed by, the parties.
Real estate agent.
We like James. But yes, it is true. Like, conveyancing is already, like we live through deadlines all the time. So you've got the settlement, but more and more often we are getting clients calling us say, I need to do this now because if I don't do, the agent is calling me, the agent is telling me that there's another offer, there's another party interested. And if I don't sign this contract today, I'm going to miss out. My offer has been accepted. To then, like, we do all the work. And then it was like, oh, he signed with somebody else. They signed with somebody else because, and that's what the market is doing to buyers. I feel sorry for a lot of my clients. I do.
In full transparency, I think I did that to you this afternoon, but I'm fine. I'm, yeah, yeah.
Fine.
No, from personal experience, lately we've been losing deals, full transparency, we've been losing deals to first-time buyers on this 5 deposit scheme. And I'm finding that even though we're within a few $1,000s of the offer, the feedback is, you've lost out to an unconditional buyer. And my conditions, I've got a laundry list of conditions that I often put, like you've seen in my contracts. So often there's a laundry list of conditions that we put into contracts to protect my buyer. But a lot of first-time buyers, I'm finding that they're virtually unconditional, if not unconditional, and that worries me for the purchaser at the end of the day. But yeah, it's always great to have a line of defense as a conveyancer on your side, looking through that contract and making sure that it is in your best interest as well. Maybe circling back a little bit more from a tax planning perspective, George, often when people are buying investment property, especially lately, there's fads around buying in a trust and buying through a self-managed super fund. But what tax entity structures do you feel, or even cash flow considerations, buyers need to consider before they set themselves up for buying an investment property in 2026?
Well, to answer that question, ladies and gentlemen, there'll probably be 2 breaks between now and 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. So breakfast will be served downstairs. So it's a fairly common question that we're sort of getting more and more now. And for the last probably 2 to 3 months, the influx of people wanting to purchase property has just been absolutely phenomenal. Entity structures are important to think about, but I think what probably Andrew touched on more than anything is you need to have the end in mind, because a lot of people are looking at and getting spooked by non-good buyers agents who are throwing them into some properties that are really quite negatively geared, and they're throwing it into one person's name and recommending that, go and do it because you're a high net worth individual, you're earning $250,000 a year, go and lose some money so that you can get some tax benefits for it. And then all of a sudden, 5 years down the track, it'll be neutral. And then after the next 5 years, you're actually making $500,000 and you're paying all the extra tax at the highest marginal rate on all the earnings from it. So it's sort of like a silly thing to do, because then you're going to sell it, and you're going to pay the top marginal rate at capital gains tax. And there's a whole flow-on effect of errors that you can actually have. But where we're seeing a lot of positive stuff happening is where they're coming in, looking at it, well, we want it to be part of our long-term plans. And we put them in touch with people like Andrew who say, yeah, if you want to have something tangible that because you feel that is a great investment for you, here's how we put it into the mix. And they can buy it as individuals. And if they've got some businesses involved, we can use trust structures where their businesses are owned by trusts to provide the positive income. The negative gearing effects can be absorbed by that, and that works really well. But then you've got land tax as an issue. So then you've got to think about, well, if I have more than, because I'm paying land tax $1 in a trust, so I need to then think about, do I have everything in New South Wales, or do we use Gianni's strategy and have multiple properties in various states where we actually spread the load and pay less tax? That's a great way to do it. And then we've got the people who are looking at commercial property, and we have different structures for those, because inherently with commercial property, and Andrew's seen this quite a bit, commercial property is great or better in a super fund structure, because you're literally passing all of the costs along to the tenant, which is usually them in their business, and getting all the tax benefits there and having all the income flowing through to the super fund to build up the cash for then Andrew to then invest in more diversified stocks. And that's a better way to actually manage that side of it. So depends on the kind of property, where you are in your life. Are you a rent investor? Do you want it as a long-term strategy to move into as a holiday home? Do you want it as a a strategy to create some wealth or estate planning? Have you considered all those things? Do you have things that you want to pass on? It's a whole minefield, and every single circumstance is different.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's really horses for courses, and it really scares me sometimes. Like, I see Facebook ads promoting people borrowing through trusts to maximize borrowing capacity, and I'm like, oh mate, you're losing your land tax threshold, you're losing negative gearing, you're paying $3,000-4,000 a year to manage the trust, everything under the sun, just so the mortgage broker can lend you a couple extra bucks, and it really scares me because the impacts of that are going to be felt a lot later in life. So, yes, please tread carefully and seek the advice of a qualified financial planner and tax accountant before you go setting up any tax structures. Once we have the investment property, we need to put it in the hands of a good property manager. And now, I say this very, I want to actually exclaim this, like you need somebody on your side who's experienced, because typically property management is an entry-level role. So I want to understand from an experienced professional like yourself, James, in the property management, in terms of, I understand you're a business development manager, but you look after a ton in the area. What are 3 biggest things that new investors need to have in place by 2026 to ensure that their investment is competitive, it's compliant, and it attracts a high quality tenant at top dollar, really?
Look, it's an interesting topic around the compliance piece. It is important, obviously, to speak to a property manager that's local to where the property is. If you are buying interstate, the compliance and minimum standards in different states are very different to New South Wales. So like with New South Wales, basically the 2 main things is smoke alarm compliance, making sure they're checked every 12 months, and then water efficiency if it's applicable, mainly for houses. But in terms of getting the best bang for buck, getting the highest rental return, I generally just kind of apply common sense. If the property has a rundown kitchen, then maybe that's best place to to spend your capital, invest in the kitchen, elevate the rental returns that way. There's also other sort of small, more granular things, like if it's in an apartment and there's a shared laundry facility, then perhaps thinking about putting in some connections in the bathroom or the kitchen or somewhere inside the actual unit, because you will get a higher rent whenever a tenant has the comfort of having a washing machine and dryer inside their own apartment compared to sharing the space. And also just common sense applies to the type of property, like with your larger houses and sometimes apartments too. Having a built-in wardrobe is highly relevant, because if a tenant is moving in and out, say every 12 months, and they're having to carry around a wardrobe, it just makes moving a little bit more cumbersome than making sure that that property maybe has a wardrobe and investing that little bit extra in that. But whenever it comes down to leasing properties, in order to make sure that your property is competitive, you've generally got 3 variables or controlled areas that you have full control over, and the rest is a little bit out of your control. So the first is how the property presents online, just making sure it presents really, really good. The photos online are the first chance that the tenant, or the first time that the tenant will be in contact with your property, and it does leave a lasting impression. With us, we will generally take many, many photos. We pride ourselves in the way that we advertise our properties, and it translates into the data. The second thing is how the property is presented in person. A lot of landlords will sometimes push us to just get the property online, start showing it, when the tenant's in place. And our general practice is to wait until the property is vacant before showing it. Generally, if we're trying to show a tenant whenever a tenant's vacating, this box is stacked to the ceiling, the place maybe hasn't been cleaned as nicely as it could be. The beds aren't made, whatever it may be. The house is in a bit of a state of chaos. Obviously, everybody's moved before, everybody knows what it feels like. But also maybe the property is vacant, but it hasn't been cleaned. The backyard's full of leaves. It's just these small little things that people can do in order to minimize the vacancy and get a sort of higher return at the end of financial year. And then the third thing is just price, making sure the property is priced correctly, looking at the numbers, not being sort of driven by emotion or sort of got the blinders on or anything like that. If if the property is being advertised and it's sitting vacant for 3 weeks, you just got to sort of calculate what the vacancy is on that, and perhaps making an adjustment on price, and really just kind of pricing the property sharply to begin with is the key to minimizing vacancy.
Yeah, thank you so much. Look, awesome answer. The other thing I wanted to add is I feel that sales and property management are very similar in the fact that the longer you stay on the market, people will wonder what's wrong with you. I liken it to dating. Like the longer you're single, people will wonder what's wrong with you. So, presenting well, staying clean, and pricing yourself appropriately. Come to think of it, they're also dating items as well. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I wanted to take this opportunity to open up to the forum now. If anybody has any questions, this might be one of the rare occasions that you get to ask a panel like this questions about purchasing property. I'd love to hear from you guys. Anybody got a question for me? Yeah, Huss. Thank you so much.
Just have a general question. Let's say, assume someone is around my age and got that super sitting around, say, $250,000. What would be the best sort of top way to basically approach it in terms of that property investment ROI perspective?
I think that might be a question for Andrew. We'll go with that. Right?
You stepped in by saying your question was, and it always is when it comes to people coming in my door, the office door, is how do I buy property in superannuation and how do I buy it through SMSF? And I will always say, tell me about yourself. Tell me what you want to achieve. Tell me about your work history. Tell me about what is it that you want. Because in the end, no amount of money that you might make from property will eventuate if you're forced to sell it, right? And there's a minimum requirement. So I'm an SMSF specialist. That's the highest designation an accountant or a financial advisor can have to give advice on self-managed super funds. But 200,000 is the entry point. Even though you look really young, you might be, say, above 50. Then if we're talking about buying property, I'm going to jump through it and just assume it's appropriate, right? Say it's appropriate, you had the same risk profile, you really love collecting your forms for tax to give to George every year. This is something you just hold on, you got your spreadsheets, you do it, you pour over it every day, you have your little money in your buckets with your rent, then you get your rental statement from James and you're like, yeah, this is it, I've got everything, I've got all my insurance sorted. At 200,000, there's not much you could buy, right? You'd have to borrow, speak to Mike, that's in his ballpark. You need to get advice, so you probably have to see a financial advisor, a good one hopefully, and you need the right structures in place, right? So that you get the advice from the advisor, get George to set up the structures, then you borrow. Then you got to borrow whenever you have what's called a limited recourse borrowing arrangement. You will borrow anywhere, Mike could correct me, but between 70 to 75%, depending on if you have a corporate trustee or individual trustee. Normally they prefer corporate trustees, isn't that right, Mike?
Have to have them, yeah.
Yeah, that's so. I've been doing it for so long. I've had clients that had as individual trustees, but just recently it's all corporate trustees now, because it's not just about getting the money. You're now a landlord. And so what happens if someone falls over in that property? Have you thought about the risk that you're going to take on, not only as the landlord, but also as the director and solely responsible? How are you going to bear that risk? Bear the risk of non-compliance with your fund, bear the risk of non-compliance with the property in terms of its safety, those standards that James was talking about. And so once you factor all that in, you have to pay LRBA off within 15 years. So your mid-50s, so between 42, yeah. So we're whacking on 15 years, right? And so you say, that's enough? will I pay it off, right? Because it's, it's great. Buying property outside, it's great because you have that high income and you can, as George said, you can get that negative gearing. But if you're in super, it's 15%. How effective is that gearing, right? Then you're saying, okay, at some point as an advisor, I would want to replace your income with your assets. So it's passive income to kick you so you don't have to work anymore. So if we don't sell it, is it able to provide you that income? And all these questions need to be answered. And so it's so much, I don't ever say no. I just say, I give you the education, the balance of all what is appropriate for you. I talk about the opportunity cost to, say, you and your wife and what you might be able to provide to your children in the meantime, and also provide alternative strategies. And if in the end it works out because it's the optimum strategy, that's the way we go. But that's how you can see how it's such a broader question. And in the end, you will choose the optimum strategy for you, but a lot of people maybe underestimate the amount of compliance required of borrowing to buy property in a super fund. The rules, particularly with the ATO and APRA, ATO are very strict on single asset funds, right? So they don't want to see just one property with borrowing. You assume that you would just have the deposit. No, you have to have the deposit. You need to pay for the stamp duty, and you bring that back. There's no 5% deposit within superannuation. So just imagine what sort of property you're buying and whether that would be satisfactory. And so the first step to answer your question, go see a financial advisor. Yeah.
Yes.
I can.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Not the first one. Can I buy a property with?
Yeah. To add to what Andrew just said, and he was probably, and I can say this because he's next to me now. But what he didn't say is that even Andrew would be sort of qualifying this, because most of the governing bodies that look at financial planners and their certifications and their insurances and all the rest of it will tell you that, and the benchmarks now, 250 is too low a limit for you to start thinking about property. You should, and SMSFs, as a matter of fact, you should be looking at probably about 350. Wouldn't that be correct?
Yeah.
Because that's what they're looking at the moment. And even then, consider, Section 1 of the SIS Act. The primary purpose of a superannuation fund is to provide retirement benefits to members. That's the guiding principle of superannuation. And when Andrew looks at that, fundamentally, yes, a property, but a good property, not necessarily negatively, but what Gianni is purchasing for some of our clients is phenomenal, because we're talking about neutral depositive over very short periods of time. They're the kind of properties that you want. Not all these negative geared ones are going to be negative geared for ages. But having them in there is great, but you need a balanced portfolio. So if you're thinking about your super, talk to Andrew first before anything. Forget talking to your accountant, because he's going to give you bad advice. Talk to Andrew or Gianni. They will steer you in the right direction and which way to go. It's not necessarily the first step, but maybe the second step in your super fund strategy.
I don't know if Huss wants to buy in his SMSF anymore. But yeah, I think that's an important point. People have unrealistic expectations around what they can achieve. So it's important to understand their goals, more importantly. Did anybody else have any questions that they wanted to raise to this panel? Yep, please.
And that's for you, James, Jay. More than often, all of you guys, George, Andrew, you talk about the series of mistakes that people make when they're buying property, right? And how those mistakes compound over time and become a snowball, right? That's before you buy the property. But after you bought the property, then people also incur in a lot of mistakes, in my view, that actually long-term reduce their yield over their investment. And more than often, I find myself in a Sunday barbecue, and everyone talks about property in a Sunday barbecue in Australia, right? That's no other topic. And I over here, people say, oh, you know what? I'm going to renovate my bathroom and I'm going to renovate my kitchen because then I can get a better rent or I can appreciate my property value. My property value will appreciate over time and I'll get 1.5, 2 times when I sell my property. And I listen to that and then I run the numbers in my mind. So 30 grand, per bathroom, 2 bathrooms, 60 grand, the kitchen between 50 and 100 grand, 160 grand, 200 grand in renovations. But bricks and mortar depreciate over time. What appreciates over time is the value of the land. So from an empirical point of view, because you guys have the data, you do this every day, how that barbecue argument is correct, that you're going to recoup, you're going to get back that investment, and you're going to get back that investment. Is that true? Because I see people renovating perfectly good bathrooms, perfectly good kitchens, just because, and they tell themselves a lie, and they justify, hey, I make more money when I sell it. But that's not true. What do you guys think about that?
Because the reason why I say that is because I'm sure you've seen a lot of people come to you and say, if I redid the bathroom, how much more rent can I get? Would that be true?
Yeah, it's a pretty common question that I get, many times a week. It ultimately comes down to, like, you do need to run the numbers. If the bathroom was done 5 years ago and you're going to spend another 30 grand on the bathroom now, no matter whether you look at it from a sales perspective, a rental perspective, the numbers just won't add up. If the bathroom's 20 years old, and the grout's, getting cracks in it and, the bathtub's falling apart and, the vanities, got waterproofing issues and, things like that, that's the time when we generally recommend to freshen up the bathroom, or the same applies for everything in the house. If you kind of break it down on, say, 30 grand on a bathroom, you're very rarely going to make it make sense financially from the rental side. It's always going to be looking at it from the sales side. And so what the conclusion most landlords and clients that I deal with is, look, I probably shouldn't do the bathroom now. I should do it just before I sell. And that's generally kind of good advice, but at the same time, if the bathroom's falling apart or, the floorboards are coming up and, the carpets are, got stains through it and, wear marks and all sorts of other stuff, that's the time when you need to kind of use common sense and go, all right, well, these carpets do need some work. We should give a bit of attention to the carpets. And, with the kitchen, again, if it's starting to fall apart, it's 50 years old or whatever it may be, you kind of do need to sort of apply common sense. And ultimately, you've got to bear in mind your goals with the property. If you're going to hold on to it for, another 15 years, then maybe doing the bathroom now isn't going to be a bad idea, because you can kind of get your costs back over that 15-year period. But if you're going to sell it in 2 years, then maybe just holding on to it and keeping the property as is, maybe sort of doing the stuff that's required and then, doing it just before you sell. Does that answer the question?
In my perspective, I'm a very numbers-driven, ROI-focused. Like, if you're going to be spending 20, 30 grand on a bathroom, or what realistically is going to be the rental return on that. So, like, I personally would be speaking to somebody like James or a sales agent to give an appraisal on, what is that ROI like? Is it going to be $20 a week? And then am I going to be holding it for 10 years or something along those lines? Or if I do it prior to selling or just prior to selling, how much is that going to add in terms of value on my sales price at the end of the day? And then you have to consider other things like, how will it impact my CGT calculations? Can I depreciate that if I do it now? Can I get an updated depreciation schedule and claim that back on my tax? But nowadays, in all seriousness, the cost of building supplies, the cost of trades, the ability to get a trade out to your location it's a fight in itself. So like renovating on a budget, making it presentable and providing that it's structurally sound at the end of the day. Like to James's point, if it's falling apart, then yes, you need to do something about it. You might as well do it properly. But if it presents well and you're able to uplift it in a manner that presents well. So Sherry Barber's the queen of this. She does the tile paint or the new splashback or the new coat on a bench top or something like that, and it looks $1 million. So something like that where you can minimize your upfront costs and maximize your return on investment, I think is the ultimate. Any other questions?
Gianni, I already know your thoughts on the 5% deposit scheme. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
It's really interesting what's going on at the moment. When you look, in fact, as recently as driving out here tonight, I'm hearing that the government or the regulatory bodies are looking at restricting investment borrowing. They're concerned about investment borrowing blowing out. And so now they're looking at dialing back the debt to income ratios so that you can't get, extended big loans for investment purposes. So we've simultaneously got the government stirring the pot at the bottom, creating demand with a 5% deposit scheme, yet doing nothing on the supply side and cooling demand at the same time, in other areas of the market. It's bizarre what's going on. But the undoubtable truth is that the 5% scheme is really causing, and I'll hand to Gianni next because I'm sure you'll have a perspective on it. I'm certainly seeing my clients saying that they're seeing instant impact in the market because, pre-approved clients who are going out to look for property are finding that all of a sudden what they were looking at is no longer affordable because there's that much extra competition in the market. So, yeah, look, I mean, I've got kids. If they can benefit from that scheme, great. That's nice. It's got a place, but it's creating a false dynamic. It's not sustainable, and I'm not a fan. I'm more of a free market guy. I'd prefer not to see that kind of intervention in the market. I just don't think it's very clever, particularly when you're not doing anything on the supply side.
Yeah, quite passionate on this. I used to work in investment banking, so risk management, and for me, I came into financial planning to educate people. Lots of people get sold to, right? So throughout all of it, I like to strip away and say, what's in it for that person who's talking to you? And for the property spruikers, Gianni's one of the few, because he comes from a background of financial planning, that he's pure. But like everyone else is trying to sell something. They've got a relationship with the builder. They're getting paid a marketing fee. The only way for them to make a buck is for you to say yes. No one's saying no. That's why I love buyer's agents, because they are acting on behalf of the client. Sales agents, those dodgy real estate agents, not James. Here, I'll get it over the line. It's like a dating analogy. He's like booked out Tinder 10 dates on the same night. If one person doesn't turn up, they still got another 9 dates to go. And so it's dirty, right? And so in relation to what Mike was saying, on one hand, I've seen it so many times in cycles. It's my job to look at trends. Governments care about just propping up one sector to pay them more taxes on one level. And so they send all the first home buyers to go die, right? When there's no market. On the other hand, I look at interest rates, and interest rates were struggling because the economy's flagging. Suddenly we had 2 more interest rate cuts in the wings, and suddenly inflation spikes after this 5%. I tell you a rule. Deposits screen out people who are bad at saving, right? To be able to pay off your loan, and then Mike, I understand Mike's a good mortgage broker. He would like you to pay down your loan. But most mortgage broker users want you to hold on to that loan forever. All the banks want you to hold on to that loan forever to pay that interest, to be indebted for life, right? If you buy that huge property, but you never pay it off, guess what? You've not actually increased your net worth, because guess what? Even though the house goes up in value, you're going to have to sell it and buy another home to live in, or you're rent vesting. The rent's going to keep increasing. And so is it a good idea? No, it's a stupid idea, right? And then APRA released...
What do you really think?
Well, I think the way APRA thinks, right? So APRA is a prudential regulator. They literally said, we need to cap lending people 6 times whatever the household income is.
Yeah.
And that, to me, and even though Mike's like, damn, that's going to kill business. But like, that's, he did not say that. It is a dampener, but it's responsible, because when you have enough money, the conversations I have with clients, is that socially responsible? You know, how's that going to better society if the kids can't even buy near mum and dad, you know, where they can have whole family units? You have mum and dad living in an area and the poor kids are living 3 suburbs to the west and south in Sydney because that's all they can afford, right? How are they going to care for the kids? Mum and dad, maybe now they're young enough to travel, but a few more generations of people having kids at 35, 45, mum and dad aren't going to be able to get there, right? And so, you know, this is so much more. And so when, you know, your question about 5%, it's allowing all what they didn't realize. It's not just this generation of home buyers, it's all the people that were locked out from 3 generations that didn't have their money in order. And I get so sad because I know that they will buy, they'll struggle, then all the mental depression that will come about not understanding what they signed up for, because in a panic they'll emotionally buy because this is their chance to earn a home, but really they shouldn't have. And then when interest rates do rise again, there'll be a reckoning, not for all, but for a few, and that those few people, more than just a few people, will suffer. So that's my thought.
Say that, yeah, 40s, 50s buy now, and it's their first home.
Yeah, I'm seeing that a lot. But
Yeah. From the other side, buyers agents, I'm not sure about your experience. It must be great, but I've had, late night emails to Gianni because I've had 3 buyers agents from other clients, sending emails, and they are terrible, sending them into so many silly property deals that, more than $1 million, 2.5% return. And I just sent them to Gianni and said, can you please help these people? Because they're just getting bad advice.
I'll try to be quick on the first time buyer. Long story short, I'm not a big fan of it. Number one, it's not means tested as well, so anybody can do it, and that will create a problem for the subsequent generation. It's going to create a quick growth spurt now, lock people into 95% debt, and then in a year or two, you may find that because the market can fluctuate up to 5%, they will actually have a 100% loan to value ratio, potentially more. And so that will put them in actual dire strait. And so the government has guaranteed that 15% to get them to 80%. And as a result, the government will be on the hook for that 15%. But regardless, the government doesn't get to decide when they sell the property. So it'll lock this generation into potentially a poorer asset because they've rushed to get into the market. That's probably my first point. I'll probably end it there. The first time low deposit scheme came in on the 1st of October, and I've been buying for a few different clients in a couple of markets at the $600,000 price point at the moment. And I've seen prices jump 20 grand easily in those markets, 3 separate markets. So it's had almost an instant effect on property prices. Now, first time buyers, from what I understand, it's roughly 18, we'll call it 20% of the market are first time buyers. But there's tons of people that are subsequent home buyers that won't be able to get into the market now. And so how are they going to get into the market? They might have been previous first time buyers that bought a 2-bedroom unit in a high density location, and now their family's grown and they want to buy a house now. How are they going to get into the market? So it's really only catering for one small sector of the market. And probably my last point is, first-time buyers are taking investment property, which means that tenants have fewer properties to choose from now. So of those people that can't afford to buy and are stuck in the rental pool, where are they going to live? That is putting further pressure on rental supply as well, when we're already in a very tight rental market as it is. We used to use a benchmark of 2% as a tight vacancy area, as an example, prior to COVID. And now the Australian national average is at 1.3%. That's the average vacancy rate across Australia. There's areas that are at 0.5, 0.6, where 5 out of every 1,000 rental properties are vacant, as an example. So, and there's multiple people fighting for those rental properties in those areas. And that's where you hear the horror stories of people camping or living in caravans or living in their car, which is they're dying for private investment into those areas to free up properties for the rental pool. So as you can probably tell, I'm very passionate about it, but I'll stop.
summarize, there's a lot of love in the scheme.
Is your friend has any?
Any other questions? Yeah.
All right. So, just more for rental income, what are your guys' thoughts of Airbnb and stuff? Because you mentioned about rental market, you need tenants and stuff like that. That kills off the tenants, right?
If I can, I want to jump on this because
Me too.
so Airbnbs were around long before Airbnb. They were called holiday rentals. And in a free market, they are able to operate pretty well, actually. If anything, the only real competitor to Airbnb are hotels and motels and other resorts, whatever. So really, for me, if people are able to get away with Airbnbs and short-term rentals, it's because the hotels are too highly priced. They're a cheaper alternative. That's number one. Number two, they only account for a very small percentage of the overall rental market, but they get a bad rap in a lot of cases. And more often than not, Airbnbs actually generate revenue for the local economy, for tourism, for cleaners, for property managers. They actually generate more for the local economy than they take away in terms of rental supply. So I'm a pretty big advocate of allowing for free market and allowing for Airbnbs, because Airbnb has only really been popular for the last sort of 5 or 10 years, but they get an unfair bad rap. Stays, Airbnb, Booking.com have jumped on the bandwagon now, and I'm actually an advocate for them for the local economy.
Me too, but yeah. However, just to qualify that, the unfortunately the Airbnb market, I agree with Gianni. It's a great market to have. If you're an investor and you want to invest in that, it's a great return on your investment. You know, I've got a couple of clients who've got an Airbnb in, of all suburbs, Cogra, and they make out of this one Airbnb $120,000 a year rental. Like, that's just phenomenal. Having said that, you're now finding, because of all of the things that everybody's been saying now about the 5%, causing a shrinkage in the market and changing, the bias towards more people buying in, less rental being available. The government's now introducing, for some areas, you cannot Airbnb for more than 120 days. So there are, I'm looking at a property at the moment that I'm looking to buy for myself, and it's saying you must take into consideration you are not allowed to Airbnb this for more than 120 days. Some are 90 days. So it depends on the area and the capacity. So that then changes everything that Gianni's saying, and it's killing that Airbnb market, which is not a great thing, but it takes away free economy because of that. And the bylaws, exactly right, which are changing strata and the way that that's going to be presented in the future, and then potentially longer term if the strata laws aren't adjusted. And then the ATO's now jumped on the bandwagon in relation to Airbnbs, which, as Gianni said, holiday rentals were always what they were before they were Airbnbs. And the legislation was always there, but accountants in their wisdom sometimes forget to interpret the law correctly. So we've got, and I've had recently a client come from another accountant who said, I'm Airbnb-ing this one, and it's Airbnb'd for like 2 days of the year, because that's all we can get, but we want to claim all the deductions for it. And these people have got it in Bateman's Bay, and they live in Canberra, and everybody knows that everybody in Canberra's got a holiday home in Bateman's Bay. And I said to them, you do realise that that's just not going to fly with the ATO. Oh yeah, but I said, do you stay in it? Oh yeah, we repair it about 190 to 200 days of the year. And I went, it's not going to work. The ATO's now issued rulings on that. They're basically closing the door. They're actually auditing these. So if you're doing it, and please don't think you can get away with anything with the ATO, they look at the Airbnb ads and they come to you with the statistics and the information on those particular properties and say, no, you didn't.
I want to jump in as well. Just to clarify, your question, was it to say what we thought about Airbnb or what we thought about Airbnb as for investment purposes in terms of yield? Okay. Airbnb's here to stay, right? When I go overseas, I'm cheap. I'll go find the Airbnb. I think it's really cool, right? But anything new, there's no regulation, and now regulation's catching up. So what George was saying, all those factors, they like Airtasker or whatever it might be, the ATO just keeps logging more and more information. When they come at you, just make sure you paid your taxes. So one of the other things that I'm sure George is aware of is around your principal place of residence and people renting out that extra room, right? And so people thinking, oh, I've got that principal place tax exemption. No, you don't. If you actually rented out that room, and people have not done a cost benefit analysis of what that home is worth. You know, if that's a $6 million property and you rented out a room for what, $100 a week, like $400 a week, is it going to be worth that $2 million capital gain at 10, maybe 1/5 of that home? No, right? It's cost them so much. And so they should get advice. They should think about these things before they go and do them, because that little few dollars in their hands is not great. I mean, James, long-term rental, right? They split the market between long-term rental and short-term rental. And so they've got the 180-day rule on top of those 90 and 120-day bylaws is 180, right? So they don't want any long-term leases. So you can only rent it out for 6 months and that's it. So just be mindful when you're looking at your property and you're thinking about Airbnb, and the demographic might mean that you can only rent it out for 6 months a year, depending on where it might be to comply. I think your longest lease might be 3 months. I don't know. And so and say, does the numbers stack up in that term, right? Or is it better off just being on a normal lease with someone like James, who's going to take care of the property, make sure he does the regular inspections, and that property's going to last a long time. Just remember, the more people through a property, the more. I'm not going to give a dating analogy here.
Be very careful.
Very so careful. Just yeah. It's just there is more upkeep, right? And so just make sure you consider all aspects. Jane, feel free to weigh in.
Anything?
Look, it's an interesting topic. I think also, I think the panel's spoken about a lot of different topics, but my perspective is, whenever you're considering about doing an Airbnb short stay kind of arrangement, really kind of obviously focusing on the numbers, not just look at things that are run the numbers based off the place being tenanted for 6 or 7 days out of the week, base it maybe off of 3. The reason why I say this is, in the last couple of months, I've probably spoken to a dozen people who have their property as an Airbnb who are looking to change it back into a longer term rental. The legislation's changed where it's making it a little bit more difficult. And the amount of people that were coming through the property isn't the same. Property management fees eat into their margins, cleaning, like all the other sort of stuff. And also, to what Andrew said, short-term tenants are a lot harder on a property. Like, you have, rather than a long-term rental where you might have to paint every 5 to 7 years, with a shorter-term rental, you'll probably have to be doing that every maybe 2 to 3 years. So there's additional costs involved, and I've seen a couple of clients where they've had their property for a number of years as an Airbnb, who are now looking to convert it into more of a long-term, tenancy. I think also, separate to that, there is a lot of hype around the Airbnb market. Being on rental listings and fielding inquiries day in, day out, I can probably tell you, like just today, I've spoken to about 3 people who have asked me about the listings I've got online at the moment, to go, look, would this owner consider, doing a short-term, rent? I'll pay you guys a set amount of rent, and then obviously whatever I take, I take. So there is some popularity around it, especially it is seasonal coming into the Christmas break. Obviously a lot of people, are looking at it. I've even got clients that, will go stay with family, or, they'll go on a holiday and rent their place out over Christmas, New Year's, and rake in a killing. So it's just about balance and really kind of, understanding the numbers.
I wanted to jump in quickly about numbers. So quickly. It's all right. Walter doesn't have to edit this one. So say like I just about numbers real quick. So who put up your hands if you're a numbers person? Yeah. Okay. So it's an investment property. You're doing this to earn a bit of money, right? So how much are you going to get more? $100 a week. And so Walter asked the question about, oh, you're around Christmas campfire, and someone's going, oh, I've renovated the bathroom. It cost me what 40, 30 barbecue 30. I'm trying to make it more glamorous. 30, 40
Please,
grand.
I like it.
Yeah, of course.
You've been
Brazilian barbecue. Yeah, so $40,000 for a bathroom, right? And so you $100 a week, you're gonna get $5,000. So if you have to do a renovation within 5 years, $5,000 times 5 is $25,000. How quickly are you out of the money, right? If it's $100 a week. If it was like Gianni says, and it's $20 a week, you're getting $1,000 a week. You're gonna pay that bathroom off in 40 years, right? So this is where numbers are really important. How enticing it is to say I'm going to get more income. It may cost you more. And I'm sure James has some horror stories where people have trashed a property. Your landlord's insurance is that bond is not going to cover you. So, certainly something to think about.
I'll just qualify because I'm actually in agreement to actually the Airbnb market for some clients, and some very specific examples that I've got for some clients where we actually made a conscious decision that it was an absolutely brilliant investment for them because they've bought it in an area where it's highly utilized. One who did it down in Jindabyne / up at the Snow, where for 3 months of the year they're actually leasing it out, and it's they're making an absolute killing for that period of time. They will probably make 6 times the normal rental during that 3-month period that you would for a whole year. And then they can enjoy it for the rest of the year when there's nobody there, because they actually don't want the crowds. They actually want to be there when there's nobody there. So it's perfect for them. No, I'm not saying that. And there's other ones that have bought on the beach for the same reason. They don't want to be, for instance, on the Gold Coast or in Byron Bay or in any of those areas during the peak time, but they're happy to Airbnb it and literally make $250,000 to $300,000 over a very short period of time, and then just enjoy it for the rest. So conscious decisions, great tax deductions. Well, it's actually not, because they're actually making shitloads of money, but it's a great way to actually grow an asset and actually enjoy it too.
Yeah. I wanted to add, don't buy an Airbnb if you don't want any problems, because more tenants, more problems. Long story short, things get overused, they treat them poorly, there's higher turnover of tenancy. I don't recommend people buy an Airbnb if they haven't experienced investing in property previously. There's a tool out there if you guys want as well, if you're looking to do a cash flow analysis of Airbnb for an area. It's called AirDNA, AIRDNA.com.au. If you get the premium version or the trial version, it'll give you things like expected daily cash, day rate, expected vacancy period, compliance scores. It'll give you heat maps as well around where other Airbnbs are. So check out that tool as well. I've used it previously to buy an Airbnb, and full transparency, I've got one as well. Any questions? Any other questions? I think we might wrap it up, but let's give it a big round of applause to our panel here this evening. Thank you very much. I'm sure if you do have any other questions, we'll be around to network later and talk with you on a one-on-one. But thank you again, everybody, for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you again, guys. Really appreciate it.